Good morning. It's Wednesday, the 10th of April, and this is Govindraj Ethiraj broadcasting and streaming from Mumbai, India's financial capital. Our top stories and themes for the day. The stock markets hit 75,000, driven by strong undertones, but investors could book more profits. A normal monsoon ahead, private weather forecaster Skymet says. Record air passenger traffic expected this summer. How is the industry gearing up? Have capital will go to the moon. How Indian companies planned clueless global forays in the venture boom and are now pulling back. And March was the warmest month on record already.
This is a core report with Govindraj Ethiraj.
The stock markets hit 75,000. It was a strong undertone in the stock markets, though it closed lower eventually on Tuesday, and the markets are likely to see more rounds of profit booking even if fresh fund supply continues to support or push up prices. Mature investors are always on the edge when the stock markets rise in the manner they have, but more so when they hit landmarks like the one in yesterday's trade. The BSE Sensex surpassed the 75,000 mark for the first time on Tuesday to hit a record high of 75,124. Before closing 59 points lower from Monday, that is, at 74,684. The Nifty 50 closed about 24 points lower at 22,643, but that's after hitting an all-time high of 22,768 earlier yesterday. The BSE MidCap and SmallCap indices too were down about 0.5% each. To understand how fast the Sensex has been moving, consider this. It's risen 1,000 points in just a month, having touched 74,000 on March 6th. Investments have been flowing in from both domestic and global investors, who in turn have returned to Indian equities with a fervor not seen since the latter half of the second half of last year. So the triggers include stronger than expected corporate earnings, including of companies and in sectors we've been talking about on the core report. Now, there is also a feeling of a stepped up pre-election rally, though the markets largely have priced in a victory for the current regime. Interestingly, many brokerages are also saying that overall corporate growth for Q4, that's year on year for Nifty companies, will be slow. Business Standard reports, quoting various brokerage estimates, that the combined net profits for companies are expected to grow 3.1% year on year for Q4 23-24. That's the January to March quarter for 2024, which in turn is the slowest in the last 5 quarters. For comparison, the index companies' combined net profits was up about 8.2% year on year for the third quarter, and about 3.4% year on year in Q4 23. That's obviously over 2022. Normal monsoons predicted for 2024. After erratic monsoons in 2023, which has led to, among other things, lower reservoir levels and water shortages in many parts of the country, India is expected to see a normal monsoon in 2024, private weather forecasting agency Skymet said on Tuesday. India's monsoons usually run from June to September. Monsoon rains are expected to be 102% of the long period average of 868.6 mm for the 4-month period, Skymet said and Reuters reported. While Skymet is an increasingly prominent voice in weather forecasts, many analysts and economists I speak to usually wait for the forecast from the government's Indian Meteorological Department, whose pronouncements should come soon. The Indian Meteorological Department, or IMD, has meanwhile predicted, or rather did predict, that in the April to June period, that's before the monsoons, various parts of India could record 10 to 20 heat wave days compared to the normal 4 to 8 days. A Skymet senior official said that El Nino is swiftly flipping over to La Nina, and monsoon circulation inclines to be stronger during La Nina years. The weather forecaster also expects sufficiently good rains in southern, western, and northern western parts of the country. Have capital will go to moon. In the 2000s, it was a fashion to go overseas. Many Indian business groups, empowered by a strong rupee, strong balance sheets, and unsure domestic markets, ventured overseas. Groups like the Tatas went on an acquisition spree, buying Tetley Tea in the UK in 2000, or Jaguar Land Rover in 2008, or Birla Hindalco's $6 billion acquisition of aluminum major Novelis in 2007. As the 2000s passed, it appeared that the domestic market was the place to be, and many companies, or rather most companies, swung back their focus and their investments. Those bets have largely paid off, as is quite evident. Now, many venture-funded startups, on the other hand, started launching overseas in moves which were driven by their investors and, of course, free-flowing capital. Now, this did not happen in 2000s. It happened only a few years ago. The moves did not seem or sound logical then or now. Why would a company that's barely got a grip on the promising Indian market already start announcing a rash of new investments in overseas markets? Of course, none of these companies actually got a grip on the Indian market, were actually bleeding heavily and perhaps continue to do so, that is, those that are still around. Now, there is, of course, the dream that if Uber went from San Francisco to all over the world, the reverse must also work from India to elsewhere. Well, not quite. In one example of this, the ride-hailing company Ola has said that it has reassessed priorities and has decided to shutter its overseas ride-hailing business altogether from 3 international markets, UK, Australia, and New Zealand, by the end of the month, and will in turn concentrate on the domestic market. The company told NDTV Profit they've discovered that the future of mobility is electric, not just in personal mobility, but also for the ride-hailing business, and there is immense opportunity for expansion in India. The company or business is actually not so important as is the strategic blunder of equating a venture-funded balloon in India to imagine that there were other markets to be had for the picking. The examples of the 2000s of Indian companies going overseas, however, has had mixed results. But though largely many companies have digested their acquisitions well, while in some cases they may not. The ones where they've digested them well obviously include the examples I quoted earlier, including the Jaguar Land Rover and Tetley types of acquisitions, whereas businesses like in steel run by groups including Tata's and ArcelorMittal have been plagued with various issues including costs, environment, and union tussles, including leading to plant shutdowns. However, more broadly, the market for these products have continued to exist and even grown. But then, of course, these acquisitions were not funded with reckless venture capital. It's going to be a crazy summer for aviation. The global airline industry is facing a summer squeeze with travel demand expected to surpass pre-pandemic levels while aircraft deliveries drop sharply due to production problems at Boeing and Airbus, Reuters is reporting. Air carriers are spending billions on repairs to keep flying older, less fuel-efficient jets and paying a premium to secure aircraft from lessors. And some airlines are still being forced to trim their schedules to cope with the lack of available planes, something that we're seeing in India as well. At the same time, the number of travelers globally is set to hit historic levels with 4.7 billion people expected to travel in 2024 compared to 4.5 billion in 2019. The Indian aviation industry has also been in the grip of frenzied growth, evidenced by flare-ups like cascading delays seen in December last year, and on a slightly different note, the pilot crisis in Vistara Airlines, which led to a spate of cancellations week before last. Vistara, for example, is now saying they will reduce flights by 10% to adjust for the shortage of pilots, which means it could go from 300 flights daily to around 270 flights. Other airlines seem fine for now, but this is going to be a busy summer nevertheless, and that's only putting it mildly. I reached out to leading aviation expert Kapil Kaul, CEO of CAPA India, the aviation consultancy, and I began by asking him how he was seeing overall supply in infrastructure in the coming season and his outlook for the year ahead, including, of course, how airlines were coping.
Govind, as the demand is concerned, we continue to have a very robust demand. I think it would be the same going forward for FY25 as well. The challenge right now for India is that in spite of the demand being very robust, we have a serious capacity crisis. As you will have seen in the summer schedule that DGC released, we just have a 6% increase over the last summer schedule period. So I think we have a shortage of capacity. In fact, I call it a serious capacity crisis. And that may impact growth. Otherwise, the demand continues to be robust, frankly. I think there are more and more people wanting to travel. The airlines, even in off-peaks, are doing 85, 90% load factor. In the peak periods, they could do in excess of 90s, which means that we have a capacity crisis. Otherwise, the demand continues to be robust. And as I said, supply chain issues that are led to a significant aircraft grounding, that continues to be a concern.
So if you were to look back, let's say a couple of years, maybe pre-COVID and today, what are the factors that have changed which is driving demand, including on ground and in the air?
The fact that COVID is possibly, that may be not a long-term trend. But people are going out and whether it's a domestic, regional, international, or an international location, people want to travel and they're traveling. So that's one thing that I've seen a significant shift. Whether that is permanent or that will continue, it's a short term or a medium term kind of a trend, but people are traveling. I have seen people, whoever we talk to within the industry, within the travel and distribution sector, more and more people want to travel and they're doing more and more trips. So that's one reason why I think that's a difference between pre-COVID and now. And even in pre-COVID, Q1, 15th April onwards, Bombay schools close and there is a tremendous rush. In 7th May onwards, the Delhi schools close and there's a lot of rush. So April 15th to about June end, this is the peak period in India. This time, I think it's going to be much more and more people would want to travel this year. And that's the trend that I see.
And are you, for example, counting more airports, more flights, and all of that still not satisfying the increased demand?
As I said, there are aircraft that are grounded. Getting an aircraft is not very easy. We virtually have, particularly in the summer, we have very, very, very difficult to get a used aircraft for operation. Winter, because in the European market, more aircrafts get grounded because of the winter. So then there is some capacity available. But the summer, it's peak in Europe. So getting an aircraft, possibly in the first half of this fiscal, is very tight. And though the aircraft Indigo is getting an aircraft every week, Air India Express is getting aircraft, Air India is getting aircraft. In spite of that, I think the number of aircraft that are on ground don't compensate for the kind of additions that we see.
What are you seeing as the current census in terms of aircraft in India, whether on ground or on air or in the air?
So the aircraft that are grounded, if we take Go Air off between Spice, Air India and Indigo, I would think it is going to be in excess of 100.
And how many aircraft are flying, you would say?
We should be roughly about 600.
Right. Now, on the supply side, and you've talked about the supply constraints, we've also seen a supply constraint in pilots, and that's also reflected in what we've seen in some of the airlines facing issues there. But what's your sense on the soft side? If the hard side is the aircraft, what's your sense on the infrastructure on the soft side?
So there are non-supply chain issues as well, and pilot and people shortages is I see this as a non-supply chain issue. In spite of the fact that you have so many aircraft grounded, there is a shortage of pilots that may be more for commanders than first officers. And I think the industry is going for a very strategic transition. Air India, 4 airlines are getting into one. They have a new way of looking at the operational part of their business, especially with respect to pilots. And they're trying to streamline a lot of things, which was unlike what the earlier Air India had. So I think that transition will play out. There's going to be some bit of odd ones with some people moving to a new transition, more structured transition. But that transition eventually is going to be benefiting all the pilots. But that transition is having some impact. Overall, I think the second issue is that whether you can blame ineffective rostering or maybe some other factors, the pilots are also, and this is again a post-COVID phenomenon, that there are some pilots who don't want to fly every day or fly a lot. They want to have a balance between lifestyle and their profession. So the utilization of pilots is pretty high. That is leading to some concerns. The government took some measures in terms of revising FTDL norms, which are now put in abeyance for about maybe 6 months to a year. Airlines are looking at new fatigue management risk response systems to ensure that the impact is reduced in pilots. Overall, there is a transition to a much more structured system, especially for pilots. And this I'm talking about non-Indigo. Indigo seems to be a little more comfortable right now. But overall, I think this transition has to play out because the industry is going through a very strategic transition as well. So, but I think it should sort itself out very soon. But overall, shortage of pilots is a big issue, no question about that. And that is related to technicians and AMEs. That's even related to cabin crews. So overall challenges with respect to getting people will continue as we go through a game-changing growth over the next 5 years.
So the flip side of that is that the aviation industry has huge opportunity, isn't it?
Yes, I think there's a great opportunity, particularly over the next 5-7 years. We are going to see a growth which is equivalent to what we achieved in 90 years. We're going to do in the next 5-6 years what the industry took 90 years to achieve. So I think there's going to be a great transition, there's going to be great growth, and it will bring its challenges, because if you want to double up the industry in the next 5-7 years, it's definitely going to have an impact. It's up to the industry and the regulators to make sure that the risks of this growth are minimized. But otherwise, such a massive growth is going to have a challenge. It can't be that this kind of a growth would come without any challenges. But overall opportunities are significant. We are at a very, as I said, a comfortable position. But it is these issues that needs to get sorted out before they overwhelm the system.
So you said that April to June could see surge, and likely beyond peaks that we've seen before. So we saw a lot of problems in December and cascading delays. I mean, do you see something like that happening in summer this year?
Well, I think the Delhi airport has got a new terminal in operation, which my assessment should ease out things significantly. But the challenge is that because the airside aircraft movements are restricted to 73 for Delhi, about 44 for Bombay, that will play out as well going forward. But you can expect April to June about high 90s load factor. You can see packed airports, and it will have a logistics impact for sure.
Any major either airport additions or any other shifts that you're seeing, at least in the next 3 to 6 months?
This year, Noida airport will be operational, so that should make NCR having Delhi airport is going to have a capacity moving from 70s to 70 million to about 100 million, and eventually 130, 40 million. Noida airport would start with about 12 million and gradually go to 70, 80 million. So the NCR is going to have a 200 million capacity. So we're going to have a first greenfield airport operational in NCR by December of this year. And maybe 3 months to 6 months down the line, we will have the Navi Mumbai airport operational. The Bangalore airport has capacity, Hyderabad has capacity. But it's just the airside, the peaks and super peaks that get challenged from an airside perspective. But overall, I think the airport infrastructure is aligned to the growth.
Kapil, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
March is the warmest month on record. The world just experienced its warmest March on record, capping a 10-month streak in which every month set a new temperature record, the European Union's Climate Change Monitoring Service said on Tuesday. Each of these last 10 months ranked as the world's hottest on record compared with the previous month in previous years, the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service, or C3S, said in a monthly bulletin reported by Reuters. The 12 months ending with March also ranked as the planet's hottest ever recorded 12-month period, C3S said. C3S data goes back to 1940, which the scientists cross-checked with other data to confirm that last month was the hottest March since the pre-industrial period. Already, 2023 was the planet's hottest year in global records, going back to 1850. Extreme weather and exceptional temperatures have wreaked havoc this year. Climate change-driven drought in the Amazon rainforest region unleashed a record number of wildfires in Venezuela from January to March, while drought in southern Africa has wiped out crops and left millions of people facing hunger. Marine scientists have warned last month that a mass coral bleaching event is unfolding in the southern hemisphere, driven by warming waters, and could be the worst in the planet's history. C3S said that the primary cause for this exceptional heat were human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, but other factors pushing up temperatures include El Niño, the weather pattern that warms the surface waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean. But despite El Niño easing in March, the world's average sea surface temperatures hit a record high for any month on record, and marine air temperatures remained unusually high, C3S said, quoted Reuters. Meanwhile, Bloomberg is reporting that India is ramping up coal use after recording a sharp decline in hydropower output as it braces for rising power demand and potential blackouts during the summer season. Coal's share in power output rose to 77% for the first week of April, about 2 percentage points higher than a year earlier, according to data from the Grid Controller of India, making up for shortfalls in hydropower output. Poor rainfall is affecting hydroelectricity production, with March output falling 11% from last year. And finally, Delhi's power distribution companies have said that they are predicting Delhi's power demand could cross 8 gigawatt this year during summer. After clocking a record power demand of about 7,695 megawatt or 7.6 gigawatt in 2022, Delhi's peak power demand during summers of 2024 may cross 8 gigawatt for the first time, reaching up to 8.2 gigawatt. Last year, Delhi's peak power demand had hit 7.4 gigawatt, according to the distribution companies and reported by Business Standard. That was the Core Report with me, Govindraj Ethiraj. Do stay connected with more of our coverage at the Core. You can check out our website or sign up to our newsletter for our exclusive stories, one in-depth feature a day on www.thecore.in. Do also track us on LinkedIn, where we usually post synopses or extracts of our top stories and interviews. We would love your feedback on how we can make business more interesting and relevant, including, of course, India's vibrant manufacturing sector. So write to us at feedback@thecore.in, and thank you once again for listening.